if you're autistic like me, you're very much aware that social interactions are not natural for us. It's just not something that we're pre-programmed with, unlike neurotypical people. But I can assure you of one thing, is that we can learn to do it. I can promise you that much. As somebody who worked in the sales industry for over 20 years, not knowing I was autistic that whole time, being told, oh, do this and do this, and a lot of the stuff that neurotypical people were telling me to do didn't work because they were telling me from a neurotypical perspective. But I started reading back in the 90s. I read the book How to Win Friends and Influence People. And that was life-changing for me, because unlike all the other advice, it wasn't just a list of do this, and feeling fake, because that's what everything was to me. All the advice I got given on how to sell, how to deal with people, how to influence them, befriend people, all of that, it seemed to me, because it was neurotypical trying to tell me to do things their way, it came across when I did it as insincere. But then when I read How to Win Friends and Influence People, as corny as it sounds, it was game-changing for me. And it's the original, as they say, the original self-help book. And it's a huge seller, and there's a big seller for a reason, because clearly there was people who were naturally gifted at dealing with people, and then there was those who didn't. And this book came along and said, hey, guess what? If you are genuine, if this comes from the heart and you do these things, it will work. And that, I took that to heart myself. And over the course of the years, I was able to apply this in such a way that I was better at it than what neurotypicals were. Because again, they're not doing it in a structured way. They're just doing what comes naturally to them. And there were times where, especially when it was someone quiet and reserved who wasn't very talkative and probably wasn't neurotypical either. I don't know if they were or they weren't, but they were quiet people, and the neurotypicals couldn't get them talking. And by applying some of these principles from the book, which I'll tell you about, I was able to get these people to open up. And there were times when neurotypicals would say, oh, I can't get that guy to talk. And of course, the implication was the guy that they couldn't get to talk. He was the issue, naturally. And when I heard that, that's when I realised, oh, wow, this is what's going on here. I've gone from this awkward person who didn't know how to get people to talk or how to influence them, as the book says. But now all of a sudden, people were responding to me. And I'll tell you what it is, in my head how it is. I'm not going to quote exactly the book right now, but I'll tell you how in my head this works, and maybe this will help you as well. These two principles that I combine in my head is how it works for me. And the first thing is to show a genuine interest in the other person. And just looking at them and going, oh, okay, I'm interested, and it can only work if you've been sincere, for us at least. For me, it only worked if I'm being sincere, as what the book said. And second of all, and I don't believe this came from the book, and I can't tell you who to credit this with, but it's a very Nordic way of doing things, is to not be afraid of silence. So over the years, I was happy to sit with somebody, and if they weren't talking, to not feel like I had to say something. So whether that be a sales incident or not, sometimes I'd be there talking to some customer, and other salespeople like blah 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 blah. But the customer stops talking and blah blah blah. But they might be thinking, and then now you're just talking over it, and they get frustrated and leave. I've taken over many sales that were not going very well because this process wasn't happening, or the guy was jumping straight to the selling part. Or if it's just getting to know someone personally, if you're just sitting there and there's nothing to say, if you start throwing out, oh, what about this and what about this, and just trying to start conversations, it really comes across as fake. And it can be really jarring for the other person. I really have seen that. But going back to the sales thing, I found that if, a customer came and I'm talking to them showing genuine interest in them. And in this case, how does that apply? Like, I'm not trying to get to know them personally, really. Like, I'm not going to be friends with them. But what I'm trying to get to know them and why they're there. What do they want? What problem do they need solving a lot of the time? And trying to understand that so that when they go, oh, but what about this thing? And I'm like, well, hang on, you told me I'm just looking at the garden out there and thinking if it was a lawnmower, which I didn't really sell much of those, but let's just say they've told me they've got a 10-acre lawn or something, and then they start looking at a push mower, or they've got a really small lawn and they look at this really big expensive rider mower, and I'm like, well, you told me you had a really little lawn. I don't think this is going to work for you. It's going to be very cumbersome. So you can see from that scenario, I've listened, I'm interested in them as a person and what they have to say, and I'm listening to what they have to say. And conversely, what I said about the silence, all of a sudden they stop talking, and you just stop talking, just wait and see whether it's sales or not. And if it's a personal situation, you're sitting there and they're not saying anything, just sit there and don't say anything either. There's nothing, I don't know where it comes from. My culture in Australia, it's people believe that it's bad to have silence. I'm not sure where that comes from. And sometimes people will just start asking you questions and they don't care about the answers. That's the thing. Like, they apply this in the other way, right? I've said show genuine interest in a person, whether it be as a customer somewhere or just getting to know someone, a work colleague. But let's go the other way, and you think, imagine asking questions of somebody and that you're not interested in the answers. How do you think that's going to come across? That's what that whole book talks about, is sincerity and coming from the heart, and the fact that people know. There's certain things people won't know, but they know how things come across to them. That's the point. They can tell that you're just like, you see it all the time. You see it on TV, you see it in the real world, where someone asks a question and as the person's answering, they're already asking another question. Right? You're not interested, are you? Or they give the answer, but then you ask the same question again later because you weren't really listening to the answer. You're not really interested. That's the point of the whole thing. And I'm not saying that any of this is going to make, if you're in sales, it's not going to make you a sales guru, but I'd tell you what my claim to fame was in the sales world. I was never the worst salesperson. I was always in the top, if it was a big company of hundreds of people, I'd be in the top 10 or something. And I was consistently there as long as I didn't get in my head. Won't go into that right now. But I was consistent, but that wasn't my claim. My claim to fame wasn't how much I was able to sell. My claim to fame always was, what relationship do I have with the customers? In some sales industries, they coach you on how to get ongoing business. And if I'd stayed in an industry like that, I would have done very well because people could trust me. That was another thing, right? Which I don't think this is something I really need to tell the average autistic person about, being honest, especially once you realise you're autistic and you start to unmask a little bit and you realise that, because neurotypical people have said to me, oh, don't tell them that. Don't be honest, in other words, which I've refuted that. Of course, in abusive situations, maybe not, but because you're just handing them your life on a platter, so to speak. But in general, I over the years, I got more and more honest with people, especially when things went wrong. I would just say, this is how it is. Or someone would come into a shop that I was working at and say, oh, I want this. And then they'd be looking at a product and they've told me what they want. And then they're looking and I'm like, what their needs are. And I go, well, I don't have anything. But what about that? Honesty. Don't try to sell them the thing that wasn't for them. And, I've had bosses try to, why didn't you sell that to them? Why didn't you just tell them this? And I'm like, well, as years went by, I would say to people, if you want me to lie to customers in the job interview, if I was being hired, I'd say, if you want me to lie to people or you want me to be deceitful and all you're interested in is sales and you don't care at all about your customers, don't hire me. Because that's what the thing. And that's what I got a reputation for. I could see a customer in the street and I could happily talk to them because I didn't have this feeling of, I've done something wrong. I've done something shifty and now they've seen me in public. I was never scared to see any of my customers in public. And the feedback I got when they sent their friends to me was that, you're not like the other salespeople. I'm not saying I was super special or great, awesome at sales. I'm not saying that. I was just able to apply these things that I'd learnt, being genuine, being sincere, and that led for me about the honesty, the radical honesty in the end, where I could do it on my terms. I no longer had to force people or use tricks and everything to try to get people to buy things. Now, I'll tell you a little bit of story about that, by the way. This happened pretty early on for me. It was still in the 90s, and I was in charge of videos and TVs and stuff like that at Brushes. None of you will, I don't think there'll be a single person listening to this podcast, watching it, that will even know that company, but it was a very prominent retailer back in Australia, which had fizzled out by the late 90s. That were around for a long time. And I was in charge of videos, TVs, video cameras, that kind of thing. And as such, my job was to deal with problems. When problems arose, it was my job to teach people how to use the stuff, as well as I had a sales budget. I had to sell personally a certain amount every week as well. And there was this one day, this lady came in and she started, she was called for help and they dragged me out there and she had some issues with her video recorder. But the issue she was having was that apparently the video recorder didn't have the features she was told it did. And when I came along, she pointed at me and said, "You're the one." I'm like, what do you mean? I'm the one what? Because I've got a really good memory for faces, first of all. I didn't recognise it. I'm like, what's going on? And then she said to me, well, you sold me this video recorder and you told me it did this and this and this. I can't remember what the feature was, but it doesn't matter. But she told me, I'm looking at the video recorder and I'm very much aware what each video recorder has, what features they had. And then she was naming a feature that I knew straight away that it didn't have that feature. And she's pointing, you told me it had this feature. And I'm like, oh, that wasn't me. Right. And you think, why was I so confident about that? Right? She was like, what? Like, that wasn't me. And she's like, how do you know that? You see lots of people, I remember you. And I'm like, well, the reason I know that's not me is that I know, I'm looking at this video recorder and it doesn't have that feature you just mentioned. And whoever told you that lied. And I don't lie to people, so I know it wasn't me. And deadpan just looked at her like that. And then she immediately changed him. Oh, maybe it was someone else. Like, she was so convinced it was me. And yeah, it wasn't me. I never found out who it was either. And I don't even know, like, I can't remember now whether it was something like that she'd bought it somewhere else or what. And I don't know what incentive anyone would have to lie about the feature. Or maybe they were, just didn't do their due diligence and thought, yep, it has it, and didn't check. Maybe that was what happened. But again, now I'm talking about the honesty side of things. Believe me, this is not something that comes naturally, I don't believe, to anybody. But I myself, I don't know about you, but I was actively discouraged from the honesty. Don't tell, when it was selling, don't tell them this, or, dating or friend, don't tell them X and Y. People will be just always about secrets and, you can't tell them. And in the end, in sales or personal life, it didn't really matter. I remember times where I've screwed up. I'm selling air conditioning at the time and it's not going to be installed when I said, because I screwed up and I didn't order it on the day I was supposed to or something. And I would just say, I didn't order it in time. It's my mistake. I'm very, very sorry. And what can I do to make it up to you? And there was nothing other than have to wait for it to come in. There's really no way around it. But I found that whenever I said something like that, where I indicated myself, I didn't try to blame someone else either, and just said, I screwed up. As I said, I never used language like it wasn't ordered in time. I would say it was me. And people would sort of be in shock on the other end. I could hear them on the other end of the phone sort of like, what? And they would be stunned and they would say, oh, okay, well, thanks for being honest. Or whatever it is, whatever mistake I'd made, and I just would admit to it, which I say it doesn't come easy because you know there's repercussions of it. So anyway, I hope that covers. I'm not going to, as I said, I didn't want to talk about the whole book, but just giving you the impression, giving you the idea that yes, we're not pre-built, we don't have all this stuff hardwired, but we can absolutely learn it. And my first girlfriend was pretty sure she was autistic, but she was outgoing, she was extroverted. And she was really big into psychology. She studied it at uni, as have I done. Neither of us finished our degrees, but we both, years later, she studied it when she was in her 20s, and me in my 40s, I studied it at high school, at university. But she was the one who got me interested in it, and one of my best friends back in Australia studied it as well, and he gave me his textbooks back in the 90s, and ever since then I've studied it, read textbooks or just been interested, listened to what psychologists have to say about psychology and so forth, and studied the various therapies that are around. So my encouragement to you is to get into that stuff, implement and read about psychology or any of these self-help things where it talks about, even as corny as it is, like for many years I wouldn't dare say I read that book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. It sounds so corny, but the people who thought it was corny really were neurotypical people who thought they didn't need to know any of it. And the reality is they do. If you do read the book, you'll see what I mean. You'll see that neurotypical people don't have it all down pat at all. All of these very, very important principles that are in the book, which I will talk about in future episodes. I'd love to hear your story that relates to this, of if you've learnt any self-help principles or therapies or anything of this nature, and you've applied it, and it's, again, not hardwired, you didn't come to it naturally, but you started to apply it. I'd like to hear about it. There's a comment section below in case you don't know what I'm talking about. Anyway, have yourself a good one. Take care out there.